Why do some people consistently perform better than others? One of the X factors in performance is our emotional intelligence. Now, our emotional intelligence is made up of a lot of different things. But to me, an easy summary is it's how we handle ourselves when we're pressed outside of our norms. So some of the basic components of emotional intelligence are, what's going on inside of us? How do we perceive ourselves? How do we understand ourselves and what we go through moment to moment, day to day? The other part of it is how we perceive others and what they're going through, how we interact and process and deal with the things happening around us. Another component of it is how we make decisions. Our process of making decisions, is it very calculated based on some thoughts? Is it reactive and very feeling based? These things all kind of make up our emotional intelligence, and ultimately, stress management is sort of a part of it. How do we handle stress? What kind of stress might push us to a negative side? What kind of stress is healthy that pushes us? How do we handle this? How does we stay in a range of high performance here? All this stuff is part of emotional intelligence. But again, this is the X factor into higher levels of performance. A great example is the great NFL quarterback, Tom Brady. Whether you like him or not, whether you like the Patriots or not, he's been one of the longest lasting, highest performing quarterbacks in all of football history. How is this possible? He's not the physically most able person out on the field. He's not the most gifted person physically out there, but there's something happening inside of him that he's been able to be a consistent performer above and beyond most. So that's what we want to learn. What makes people better? So as a business owner, as a top franchise owner, financial advisor, knowing what helps you perform at another level, this is really important stuff. So we're going to cover what you can do to increase this X factor to enhance your performance. However, the other really interesting part of getting better at this is being able to help others, specifically your team, and most importantly, your clients. Now, look, we've had a long run of over 10 years of really easy bull markets. Clients have forgotten what it's like when we go through some tough times. And these tough times tend to come around from time to time. I'm not saying they're imminent or they're coming, but at some point during the rest of your career, there will be some sort of market event, economic event, something will happen that will send the markets in turmoil, client accounts will go down, and they need your help. It's easy to know that someone should stay on track and stick with their allocations and listen to your advice, but it's pretty hard when you're feeling like, oh my gosh, my life savings that I've been saving for so long, a fifth of it just went away in a week. Your 20% loss is catastrophic, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars just instantly disappear. That can be really tough for people to emotionally handle. Now, you probably have some clients that have very high emotional intelligence and are able to understand that, okay, this is an extreme and I feel a certain way, but I know what I need to do. I know what decision I need to make to stay the course or to listen to my advisor because they know best. Some people, probably aren't as good. They're probably the ones that call you freaking out, wondering what should we do? We should sell everything. These are the people that we want to arm you with. How can you help these people increase their emotional intelligence and get through these points where they're pushed to their extremes? How can you help them more? So we're going to have a great segment from our investment guru, Drew Watson, on what's going on in the world, but also how he incorporates a little bit with his clients. And then I'll take a deeper dive into this and arm you with some things that you can use to improve your own emotional intelligence, but more importantly, what you can turn around and give to your clients so that they can get through these tough times, these tough decisions better with you.
Hello, D2. This is Drew Watson with what I would consider to be a special report. As we go to taping of this in mid-October, we've had about a week and a half of decent stock market volatility to the downside, and my email box has kind of filled up, and I'm sure yours has too, with questions, because I think there's a big disconnect between perception and reality of performance. And I'm also bringing you this message because I do believe, for those of you that have discretion, you're going to hear more of this from corporate leaders. It's important to benchmark your own performance, but it's also a good idea to show your clients what the performance is of fully diversified portfolios. I feel like our clients are being hit over the head by the returns of the NASDAQ, typically driven by a very thinly traded FANG stock portfolio of a lot of Facebook, Apple, Amazon, maybe Netflix, Nvidia, Google, etc. And people have taken their eye off the ball of what a fully diversified portfolio is doing. Specifically, as of the date of this taping, we have updated numbers of what's called the benchmark performance portfolios, such as for an aggressive allocated account where you'd have about 15% in the Barclays Ag and the remaining balance in stocks, all the way down to a conservative account where it's about 80% Barclays Ag and about 20% in stocks. The year-to-date numbers through the end of the third quarter, September 30th or 28th, depending on where you get your numbers, are as follows. The conservative portfolio is up a whopping 0.26% on this benchmark. Moderately conservative, about 1.4%. Middle of the road portfolios, maybe 3%. And your aggressive, under 6%. These are in striking comparison to the figures that your clients have been seeing. For example, and as an example, the IRG moderate core allocated portfolios have a net of fees return as of 9/30 of minus 1.99 with a trailing 1-year return of 0.03. Compare this, if you will, if you're not an Ameriprise believer, with that of the iShares benchmark performance of their moderate portfolio as of 0.95. So for your clients who say that they're moderate investors, basically the marketplace is saying break even is where they should have been for the year. And this data is available obviously on Compass, but if you go to iShares, look up their core portfolios, their core moderate is AOM as the symbol. Let's look at their moderately aggressive. It's AOR as the symbol. The iShares year to date is up 1.92 with a trailing 12 months of 5.52. Compare that with the Ameriprise numbers of the core moderate aggressive. I'm kind of scrolling down here. Those numbers, hot off the press this week, are year-to-date up 4.54 and 9.49. So the Ameriprise has done quite a bit better than the iShares product. Now, what's causing this dispersion in performance? I would say it's allocation to the international space. The iShares product has been pretty formidable in its allocation bias to having, roughly 15 to 20% allocated to international in their more moderate and aggressive portfolios, whereas the Ameriprise model really only has about, call it 18%. So a little bit less exposure in international, more exposure in the U.S. has definitely helped the Ameriprise models. Compare that with the moderate portfolio as I scroll up very quickly. They've got just about 13% in international, but the higher allocation to the bond market definitely is not helping that at all. But that's your traditional, what I would say, 60-40 model. Now, with the rising interest rates that we had for the last week, that fixed income performance obviously has to go down. There'll be a drawdown there as well. So, Drew, what do we do? Well, one, I think you need to arm yourself with data that you can show to a client to say, one, if we're going to be diversified, these are the type of returns you can expect to have. If you want to chase higher returns, you're going to put yourself into a much higher risk profile, and perhaps you could look at what the performance over the last week and a half and the volatility we've had of the aforementioned FANG stocks. Those would be two ideas to try to get your clients' head around where performance has been this year and what's driving it. It's been a very thin tape, as they say in the business, as far as the leading sectors, mainly buoyed by tech and healthcare. But it's your job to be able to articulate to your clients and have this information at the ready to be able to show them what's working and what is not working. Our data, what we track is the Ameriprise linked benchmarks, the Ameriprise portfolios as they're put out by the investment committee, the iShares benchmarks, because we feel like those are pretty good core agnostic benchmarks. And then if you use any type of allocation funds from fund managers like Putnam, they've done exceptionally well in the moderate and aggressive space versus some of these other indexes, especially the iShares, even net of fees. So those are things to consider to arm yourself with. We're doing a call open to all D2 advisors this Friday. There's call-in information. I'll have Ben put it on this video as well, as we're going to do a much, much deeper dive in this to make sure that everybody has an understanding of where the performance is coming from, what I would consider to be legitimate performance, and how to fix it if it needs to be fixed. John Randall is going to be doing a great emotional competency piece right after this. It was great seeing you, and I hope to hear from as many of you as possible this Friday. Thank you.
Emotional competence. Some call it the X factor in performance. This video will take you through what the heck is emotional competence, a term that's thrown around a lot. Also, we'll go through how to measure this. So there's a measurement of emotional competence called emotional intelligence. And just like your intelligence or IQ, there is EQ. So you got your intelligence quotient, you've got your emotional quotient, and there's a great assessment I got certified in about 10 years ago called the EQ-I assessment. It was developed by Dr. Baron. So this can measure your emotional intelligence, which is your likelihood to have emotional competence. So emotional things are sometimes tough for people to talk about. Here, hey John, I don't want to get into that touchy-feely stuff. But the reality is, for human beings, we're always feeling something. Emotions are kind of on the front line of our defenses as human beings, and we're always feeling something. So whether we realize it or not, it's always happening inside of us. So it's important to get better at these. This whole concept, emotional competence, it's become very popular in athletics. So in sports, especially you get into collegiate sports, professional sports, the individual performance of a team member or an individual sport like golf or tennis, the individual's emotional intelligence or emotional competence is very important in their overall performance. Let's say something doesn't go their way and they're having a bad night. Can they recover? Can they be at their best, or are they going to be mentally dragged down? Is something going to happen to them? These things are kind of part of what makes someone emotionally competent, or someone that might fold
in the face of something tough that's going on. So this has become ever more popular in business as well. It can be applied anywhere in life, but emotional competence, emotional intelligence has gotten really popular in business. Some of you may have heard about it over the years, but I think we can break it down further into what the heck it means. There's some different areas that make up your emotional intelligence. So there's 5 main areas. Within each of those 5 main areas, there's 3, I call them sub-competencies, other competencies that we'll talk about that are the real ways that you can improve your overall emotional competence. But the 5 main areas of emotional intelligence start with self-perception, which is just understanding ourselves and what's going on inside us. Self-expression, being able to communicate things to others and how we deal with others, which leads into interpersonal, which is all about our interactions with other people, and also beyond that, the ability to really understand what other people are going through. And that leads to decision making, your ability to problem solve, not just problem solve in general, but problem solve in those tough moments, maybe when we're at a heightened emotional state, either really good or really bad. Or, how good are we at making decisions? Are we impulsive? Do we think through things? And finally, that leads to stress management. In that area, I think it has to do with just how we deal with all the stuff that goes on in our life. So these are the 5 main areas. They all kind of feed off each other. There's definitely some that are related, that balance each other out. There's some that can act as opposites. So that's the real complexity in getting certified in these assessments we learn, but we don't have to go that deep today. We're just going to talk about, in general, what it is and how you can get better. So let's go through some of these sub-competencies, talk about them, what makes them up, and how you can improve on each one. So on this page here, you've got what a sample EQI assessment looks like. Now, if you've taken one of these before or you take one in the future, the way the assessment works is a score of 100 overall in each composite or each subscale. 100 is the average of all the many thousands and thousands of people that have taken this assessment. So either male or female people in your age range is what you're compared to. So your, number over or below 100 really helps us know, where you stand around the averages. So if you're more than 10 or 20 points different from the average, it means, think about standard deviations. It just means that you're further out from the norm. So you may have some areas that you're really, really strong in. You may have some areas that you're really weak in. You may have a whole bunch of areas in the middle. So this particular sample is I think a very high one, a very high overall emotional competence. So these numbers are really high. Not everyone's looks like this. But to see someone's overall score here and relate it to the average of 100 is kind of the point of this page. But through these sort of subscales, I call them, within each of the composites is what we want to go through. So under self-perception, we have self-regard. Self-regard is how we think about ourselves, how we really perceive ourselves. So think about someone that's really, really confident. Someone that's really confident may perceive themselves as really, really great. Someone that's overconfident may perceive themselves as something greater than they are, but someone that's not as confident in themselves may view themselves as not good enough or have a different self-regard about themselves. So the way we see ourselves, the way we think about ourselves is part of that competency. And it's a big one. It influences a lot of other areas, the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we perceive ourselves. And that particular one is self-regard. Self-actualization is more about, are we fulfilling our lives? Are we doing the things that we really enjoy, that we feel like we're made to do? So people that maybe are in a role or a place of life that they're really not happy with, or they feel like doesn't suit them, they would score much lower in this area. People that feel like they're thriving, they're in exactly the right role in the right place, they just absolutely love every second of every day, they would have a much higher self-actualization. Then emotional self-awareness is a tough one. It's to really understand what's going on with us. As we said earlier, we're constantly feeling as human beings, constantly. If you were suddenly attacked right now, there would be a chemical reaction in the brain, and you would probably automatically react without even thinking about it. So that's one of the safeguards or safe measures the human brain has to protect us. So unfortunately, our brain can't tell the difference in I'm physically being attacked right now, or something really bad in business happened. With your clients, it's a difference in someone's running at me with a sword and the stock market went down. So your clients might have the same reaction in the brain when the market goes down. They see their accounts go down as if they're physically being attacked. Our brain goes into a different mode. The thinking part of the brain is really shut down, and we're just kind of reacting to whatever our gut instinct is. So to understand what we're feeling is really hard, because when we're at the extremes, which is where we really need to understand and be aware of ourselves, it's really hard to, because the thinking part of the brain is automatically shut down. When you're in a normal state, if you ask yourself right now, hey, how am I feeling watching this video? You're probably in a normal state. You probably don't feel any extremes. But if something really good happens, you're all exuberant and feeling really excited. And if something really bad happens, you might be, angry, or maybe some negative emotions that really drag you down. And the more extreme those are, that's where I think it's harder to understand and be aware of ourselves. So understanding ourselves, knowing what it is that we're feeling, being aware of the things we're experiencing, being aware of our emotions happening to us, which happen at all times, that's a big part of this one. Now, that one is so important, because as we cross over to the next composite, self-expression, the areas in here start with emotional expression. So that's really the ability to express what it is we're feeling. So to recognize and be aware of what it is we're feeling is one step, but to be able to express it to another human being, that can be hard. It's hard to put into words what it is that we're feeling to somebody else. So to be able to do that and to express that, it's a skill. And so it's one of the competencies here that makes up your overall emotional intelligence. Assertiveness is another one in the self-expression composite. So assertiveness is the ability to get your point across, your feelings or your beliefs across. So if you feel very strongly about it, it's assertively delivering it. Some people that have low assertiveness might be more followers. They might sit back and not share their opinion or their thoughts. They may just keep it to themselves. Someone that's very assertive might always get their opinion out there, and it. So it's okay to be assertive and to share your thoughts. I think if you have certain beliefs and you feel that they're right and you want to share them with others, this is okay. It's not about being offensive or offending other people. It's just about the strength to let out what's inside you. And then independence really has to do with your ability to function on your own, to not have dependence on another or other human beings. Some people just can't function without somebody else. They can't make a decision without somebody else. They have very high dependency on others. So the independence is the ability to be yourself and to be free to as we'll see later, make decisions and be yourself, to be directed without being led, to be directed. That's kind of part of that one. Again, another competency in the self-expression category. In the interpersonal composite, so self-expression is kind of being able to let out what's inside us. Interpersonal composite is more about how do we deal with others. So interpersonal relationships is that two-way street of dealing with other people. So relationships that are a two-way street. All relationships are a two-way street. We give and we give, and we get from all our relationships. So our ability to do that, our ability for it to be a two-way street and not a one-way street either way, that's kind of part of interpersonal relationships. Empathy is really the ability to understand and appreciate what others are going through. What are they feeling? That, gosh, if I was in a terrible car accident and I was injured, my family member and a friend was injured, my car's totaled, what would I feel like if I was them? What if I were in their shoes? To understand what they're going through is the real true part of empathy. Now, a lot of great financial advisors and financial planners have good empathy. They deal with people, they deal with the public. Some have very good ones. Some just don't. Some are not able to understand what others are going through, saying, gosh, you're a dumbass, you should just do this. But to understand that it's really scary for them to take that step, or to really put ourselves in their shoes and understand what they might be feeling. That's a big part of empathy, and I think a tremendous skill for anyone dealing with others, anyone dealing with the public, anyone dealing with other team members. It's important to understand what others are going through. And social responsibility is about, to me, it's about putting the greater good first, all of humanity. If I see a piece of trash in the park, am I going to pick it up so that everyone enjoys the park, or am I just going to leave it there? Or am I someone that would just litter and leave my piece of trash out there and just not worry about it? What's the kind of social balance and responsibility we have to the greater good? Are we helpful to the greater good, or does that not really concern us? So our ability to understand that and have some responsibility for the greater society, that's part of this interpersonal composite. It's part of our ability to work and deal with others. So decision making, this is a tricky one, and I see a lot of people get frustrated with this first one on problem solving, and they say, hey, wait a minute, I'm really good at solving problems, I'm a financial planner, I'm a mathematician, I'm really good at this. But it's not about your ability to solve problems. It's your ability to do it when you're in one of those more extreme states. Are you really good at solving problems when you're overly excited? If something really, really, really bad is happening, can you problem solve in that state? That's more of what it's measuring. So it's not traditionally your ability to solve, it's your ability to find solution when those emotions are involved, especially those extreme emotions. Reality testing is more of, I think, grounding things. So let's say, for example, you decided that you were going to magically double your business in the next year. But in reality, probably 30 to 40% growth is the most that you could achieve in this 1 year. Maybe you'll double in 3 years or less, but the ability to double in 1 year might not be realistic. So that sort of just being able to test reality and say, well, it would really be nice to double, but this is probably what's more likely. And look, we're not talking about holding anyone back. We want to grow your business as fast as possible. It's just being able to realize, well, what's realistic here in this situation. Again, when we're in these extremes, what happens is we get really, really excited. Oh my gosh, I just attended D2 Live and I'm all fired up. I'm around a bunch of turbo growth advisors. I'm going to do this exuberant thing. And it's just not grounded in reality. Or the opposite end, that, gosh, some bad things happened. A client left me, and now all my clients are going to leave me. That's not really realistic, but it's to be able to ground ourselves in those extremes and be able to function again in decision making. We're talking about decision making. Impulse control is a big one. A lot of successful business people, entrepreneurs, just like you, sometimes we move really quickly. Sometimes we make decisions really quickly, and the snap and the flash. And that can be good sometimes. It can also hold us back sometimes. So to be able to have self-talk and talk through a decision with ourselves, with somebody else, before making an impulse decision. That's what this one's all about. Are we able to stop and think about it, or do we just do without thinking about it? So all these really make up our ability to make decisions. And I tell you, some people say that the first three areas that we went through lead up to this fourth area, which is one of the most crucial, because the ability to make better decisions is really the foundation of higher performance. If you can make better decisions, especially when you're at these extremes, when you understand what's going on with yourself, you're able to communicate it with others, you're able to work with others, that's where you can make really good decisions. Not only when you're in the middle state of feeling, but when you're at those extreme states, you can make much better decisions there. This is critical. And so these composites in decision making, they're really made up of a lot of the other previous ones we went through before. And then going to this fifth one, this is really made up of all four. And so stress management is a really important one. So the others kind of lead up to this and create this. So the areas in here, flexibility is really just our ability to adapt. Can we change? Can we be flexible? Is it one way or the highway, or can we move a little bit? It's not that we were maybe going to have a certain vegetable with our dinner, and now we're going to have a different vegetable, and hey, that's no big deal, I'll be flexible. It's more of being able to adapt, especially those extremes, being able to completely adapt your thinking, what you do, your behaviors, what you're doing in those extremes. It's being able to shift and be flexible at those times, because we might have some deep-rooted things at these extremes that aren't really the best for us. So the ability to change and be flexible when we get to these extremes, that's a big part of stress management, because if we don't have that ability, it can be really, really stressful. So stress tolerance is our ability to cope with stuff. So a lot of you have a really, really high tolerance for stress, which is great. It doesn't mean that it's a great skill. An important part here is, like in this particular example, if somebody is really high in stress tolerance, but they're not as great at problem solving, when they're in those extremes, they'll make bad decisions but be able to deal with it. So having a high stress tolerance is more about that. They can deal with the consequences of their actions. Now, not everyone, especially your team members, do not have as high stress tolerance as you. So this is a really tricky one, and if you have a very high ability to cope with things, it doesn't mean, hey, I'm Superman, I can cope with this, I'm better than you. It's important to know that possibly the decisions you make, which may not be the best ones, you're able to go on with them just because you're able to cope with them. So this is a really interesting one. Now, some of you may not have that high tolerance, and the stress might cripple you. It might really get to you, make you feel really bad at the end of the day. It may keep you up at night. It might cause physical pain, like heartburn or stomach and digestive issues. This kind of stress is one of the most wearing things on human beings. So it's great to get ourselves in a place that we can deal with an appropriate level of stress. I mean, some stress is good for us. It keeps us going. If we had no stress, we'd be complacent, and life wouldn't be very exciting. But some stress is good for us. Too much is really, really bad for us. So we've got to figure out that right point that you can deal and kind of manage it. So, and then the final one here is optimism. It's your outlook on life and situations. It's, hey, can we work this out together? I think no matter what, we're going to be able to work this out. That's an optimistic attitude versus, that person is, screw them, they're never going to do it right, and it's just, I'm going to burn my bridge with them, and that's just the way it is. So that has a lot to do with stress as well, because if we have a positive outlook on life, we believe we can work things out with others. Life's going to be a heck of a lot happier. If we have more of a negative attitude about situations, negative outlook in life, it's going to be pretty darn stressful. So our outlook, the way that we think about things, the optimism that we can have, that really helps with our overall stress management, because if we feel like things are going to be okay, if we feel like things will be better tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now, then it's it's really fun to go through life. But again, if it's not, it's pretty stressful. If we think things are going to be worse tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now, that can be stressful. So all these different things, make up, these are all the components of being emotionally intelligent and having very high emotional competence. Now, it's impossible to work at all 15 of these at once. It's absolutely impossible. But you know what? You can work on one of them at a time. And if you heard one of those areas, you thought to yourself, gosh, I'm probably not that high in that area. It's important to just focus on that one area. So this particular assessment will take you through each of the 15 areas. That has an entire page dedicated to each area, and can kind of help you with how you can get better at that area. So it'll give you how your strength or weakness in a certain area impacts you at work. It'll give you how it impacts maybe some social situations or behavioral implications that might be happening. And then it's also going to give you some strategies for action. So it's going to give you some very specific ways of how you can get better at something. So I wish we had time to go through all of these. It'd probably take 10 hours to go through each of these. But if you want to review the sample, we're happy to do that. This EQI assessment, it's in the D2 arsenal if it's something you want to go through. We have it available. Like I said, I've been certified to go through it over 10 years. Travis Cheney's been through a million of these. All our coaches. It's not too hard to go through these. I mean, you can almost kind of go. These are built. You can almost go through it for yourself. A lot of people go through it and they'll look at their scores on page 3, and then they'll say, hey, I scored really low in this one. Let me go to the one page that describes that one, and then they'll review the strategies for action, and then they'll try to get better at those. If you do that with this assessment, I mean, that's really a great step. Now, your D2 coach can walk you through it, and they can help integrate that into your coaching sessions and make sure that you are getting better at it, because I'm sure in life and in work, some of these things are probably showing up, and your coach could certainly help you through it. But just let us know if you want to go through it. Your coach can help you. But these are the constructs of emotional intelligence and emotional competence. And look, these are skills. A competency in one of these areas, it's a skill to get better at. If you were going to suddenly operate a super heavy crane, you might not have any experience or know what the heck to do to operate a super heavy crane. We would have to build the skill at that particular competency if we wanted to get good at operating that really big crane that builds tall buildings in cities. So this is the same. If these are things that you haven't worked on before, look, it's hard. We never worked on them before. So, but it's a skill, and we can get better at it. The nice thing about emotional intelligence is you can get better at it, and you can get better at it quickly. And working on just one area can influence other areas, which can boost your overall EQ, your overall emotional intelligence, which can lead to better emotional competence. So remember, this is the X factor to performance. If you want to get really good at being you want to get really good at life, at business, anything else that you care about, this is one of the fundamental areas to get better at in life. So the little things that happen to us all the time, the feelings that we have, they really influence us, I think, a lot more than human beings realize. So the better you can get at dealing with all the things that happen to us, getting really good at decision making, getting your stress levels in a zone that's just enough to keep you going but not too much to hold you back. That's really where we need to be. So that's what a lot of this is designed for, is to get you in that ideal state, to help you perform at higher levels, especially when you're in those extremes, because it's the extremes that really matter. It's the things that are kind of the ends, like, oh my gosh, I had incredible business success, or I bought these 2 businesses this year. We get all excited and sometimes don't make the best decisions. Or if something doesn't go our way, sometimes our wheels fall off. So being able to operate in those is really where it matters. So look at anyone that's ever watched any kind of sports. Watch professional tennis players when they thrive at their best at a really hard, really long match. Watch when people's wheels fall off. A golfer, whoever your favorite golfer is, a popular golfer, they probably had really good days. They've also probably had really, really bad days. You can see some people have really high competence. Sometimes some people don't. I think in your long-standing, successful year after year after year athletes, these are the people that stand out to me as people with really high emotional competence and really great skill at decision making. And they aren't always the greatest physical athletes, but they have something going on up here and in their decision making that makes them better. And it's typically, this is the biggest part of it, they just have very good emotional competence. They're able to make great decisions in those extremes when things are really good or things are really bad, and they're able to be the best version of themselves. So D2, we care about you being the best version of yourself. So if this can help you, that's what it's all about. I'd say just pick one sub-competency, one thing to focus on, to try and get better at. Pay attention to yourself, talk about it with your D2 coach, and let's see how you can get your overall performance level through your emotional competence much, much higher. So everyone stay bullish. Looking forward to our upcoming coaching sessions, and we'll talk with you soon. Take care.